Happy Tuesday, everybody. Hope you're doing good. I see the front floor seats are packed. This is great. I love the motivation and intrinsic decision to sit in the front. Great, I love it. Okay, couple of quick announcements, and then we'll get started with the speaker today. Just one quick heads up. We are making a shift to the speaker questions. There was a discrepancy between the syllabus and the Canvas, but going forward, it'll be based on what is in the syllabus, which is that we'll have speaker questions due Sunday. It's water. Speaker questions due Sunday and Tuesday of that week for any speaker. So keep an eye out. We have a speaker on Tuesday, it's due Sunday. Speaker on Thursday, it's due Tuesday. So please follow the course of the syllabus for that. Thursday, if you show up here, great, applaud, but nobody else will be here because everybody else will be in Lowell Lecture Hall. We got bumped out of here for something called an inauguration for the president. So obviously that trumps this. And so please, Thursday, remember Lowell Lecture Hall, which is right down the street, is where we're going to hold the speaker session for Thursday. And then last update is that assignment 4 is a group assignment. So that's your first group assignment. So be mindful of that. It is due on Thursday. If you have any questions, reach out to your TF. And if you have any other random questions as well, or interested in engaging, please continue to reach out to your TF. Otherwise, we are excited for the speaker today, and I will allow one of the students here to not drop a laptop, but make an exciting introduction for our speaker today. Otherwise, I'll give it over to Jerry to give an introduction for the speaker. If you're interested in this at all, too, please reach out to your TF.
Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to introduce you Mr. Kip Harkness, with a journey that has taken him from advising farmers in Timbuktu to shaping the future of Silicon Valley. Kip's multi-faced experiences are a testament to the power of vision, adaptability, and ingenuity. As the deputy city manager for the city of San Jose, he's at the forefront of not just managing, but reimagining civic infrastructure and emergency readiness for the 21st century. His allocates from the groundbreaking Strong Neighborhoods initiative to an impactful 300 million plus project portfolio speak to his ability to bring diverse ideas to life. And as a city innovator at Harvard's Tech Center, he's forging pathways for global urban transformation. His experiences show us how innovative ideas really come to real life. Let's warmly welcome Mr. Kip Harkness.
We are in an amazing place. Not just this theater, not just Harvard, but where you are, where I am right now. You are at the beginning of your career arc and journey. Some of you are fairly far along on the beginning, but you're at the beginning. And as you heard from Jerry, when you get to be my age, there's a lot that you've done, and it makes you feel really, really old to listen to one of those introductions. What I want to do today, and I'm going to need your help on this, is I actually want to share some of my career arc, but I want to do it authentically. I'm not just going to give you the highlights and the resume and the LinkedIn points. I want to give you the hard parts as well, because you're going to be in those hard parts, and I'm curious about how you're going to react to them, and I want to share with you how I did. So I'm going to share a little bit about each of my pieces of my career. I tell people I'm on career number 5 at this point. And what I'd like to do is, rather than a whole book or a 500 PowerPoint slide lecture, I just want to give you a postcard of each of those careers. Now, I realize as soon as I use the postcard metaphor that that's a little dated. So let me describe what a postcard is for those of you who don't know. Little piece of paper, beautiful picture on the front. Just enough space on the back to write the truth about what's going on, right? So you get a beach in Florida, beautiful beach, and then on the back you can write, mosquitoes everywhere, I am completely sunburned. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to give you a little postcard from each part of my career journey, and then I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to tell you the hard, honest truth on the back. And then, fair warning, after those, I've got a question for you that I'm going to throw out, and I'm going to hope and ask for your engagement. All right. So, postcard number 1. When I was about your age, I went to Chad in Central Africa as a Peace Corps volunteer. And Peace Corps assigned me to be a business advisor to a farmers cooperative with Arabic-speaking farmers on the edge of the Sahara Desert. This was a nearly perfect fit because I had never farmed, knew nothing about business, did not speak Arabic, and had never lived in a desert in my life. I'm completely, at this point, out of my depth. Chad, for those of you who aren't familiar with African geography, if you were to balance Africa on your finger, you would probably be holding it by Chad. It's twice the size of Texas, and when I was there, there were 15 miles of paved road in the entire country. I still vividly remember the day-long journey through the desert to my village, and then the folks from Peace Corps taking my trunk out of the truck and literally swinging it into the sand, introducing me to one person in the village, and then driving away. And I thought, what the hell have I done? At that point, as I mentioned, my Arabic wasn't very good. It was frankly pretty non-existent. But if you've learned another language or tried to learn another language, you realize that you can ask questions and the other person has to talk. I realize this is why 2- and 3-year-olds say why all the time, because it puts the burden on you. So I did exactly the same thing. I would talk to the farmers and I would say, Limada? Why? Why are you doing that? Why are you planting this way? Why are you selling it that way? Why are you doing this? And then they would say something very interesting, very complicated, and far beyond my ability to comprehend in my limited Arabic. And so I'd ask a second question. Shanu shokla muhim. Out of everything you just told me, what's most important? What's most important? Right? Well, it turns out if you ask these questions, why, and then what's most important, of people who actually know what they're doing, in this case the farmers, the end product is what you call a strategic plan. So they identified by asking and answering these questions some really key roadblocks on what was keeping them from being productive and being able to feed their families in the way that they wanted. The first thing was seeds. They were buying seeds in these little tiny packets at a high price and a high markup. They realized they could go to Nigeria, get seeds at wholesale, bring them back, and sell them at a discount to farmers. It was literally about 1/20th of the cost of what they were paying for seeds. Huge breakthrough. And I remember working with Algoni Isa, and we were walking through the village and selling these tubes of seeds to farmers. And I was asking Algoni Isa, and I said, have you started planting your seeds yet? And he's like, no, I haven't. I'm like, it's getting to be time to plant. Why haven't you planted? He said, well, I don't have any money. So let me set the context for this. Algoni Isa had a giant box of seeds worth thousands and thousands of francs. He was taking all of the money from everybody else, and he was honest and ethical enough not to steal, not to take that money, but he didn't have money for himself for the seeds so that he could grow them for his own family. I gave him the money out of my pocket for the seeds. It was nothing to me. I was making $7 a day, and I was the richest person in the village. And he planted his seeds that year. And the co-op went on to realize that even though they were doing much better by having those lower costs, when you followed out the market and you did a market analysis, they were getting ripped off at the farm gate. The cost for a crate of tomatoes at the farm gate was about 125 to 250 CFA francs, depending on the time of year and the quality of the tomatoes. Just 60 miles down the road in the capital city, the cost of tomatoes could be 1,000 francs, 1,500 francs, 2,000, 2,500 francs at the wholesale, not talking at the retail. The middlemen were taking almost all of the farmer's profit. Almost all of it. So they organized. We took the co-op. We created our own market in the capital city. We hired the middlemen for the workers for ourselves, and we cut out the middlemen. We captured that value chain in the profit, and we doubled or tripled farmers' profits. Right? And all of that money started going directly back to the farmers so they could buy food, clothes, education for their kids in the middle of Chad. Huge success story. Right? So that's postcard number one. Normally that's where people stop. Look at all these wonderful things I did. Look how great I am. Right? And I want to flip that postcard around, and I want to share a little bit about that time. First of all, it was really, really hard. I had a 10 by 10 mud hut, and I was the only person who spoke English for 300 kilometers. I was very, very lonely, and most of the time had no idea what I was doing or why I was there. I ended up training the new group of Peace Corps volunteers who were coming in and working with the Chadian staff to do that. And I like that very much. I enjoy training. I enjoy teaching. And I remember it was the first day I'd had off. It was a Saturday, and we'd sent the trainees into the capital city for some rest and relaxation. It was their first couple of weeks in country, so it was the first time they'd gone into the capital, first time I had some peace and quiet. And I was at my desk, which was actually in my little bedroom, and I'm typing away my report. And it's actually on a manual typewriter, and it's on a French keyboard. And if anybody has ever tried to type on a keyboard that's not your language, it is really, really, really difficult. So I'm basically hunting and pecking away. And I remember Freddie Kogio comes in. And Freddie is from southern Chad, very, very, very funny guy, super, super sharp, tall guy. And he's listening to a transistor radio, kind of has it glued to his head. He's kind of the jokester, so I think he's going to come in and tell me a joke. And he comes in, and I say, "Hey, Freddie, what's going on?" He says, "Have you heard the news?" I'm like, "No, what's the news?" "There's a coup attempt. They're trying to take over the government in the capital." I'm like, "Oh." And then I remember, I've just sent 6 trainees, all of them young Americans, all of them young American women, into the Capitol by themselves for their first time at R&R. And then I'm like, who's the security liaison? And then I remembered, I'm the security liaison. We had gone around and they had a bunch of lists of who wants to be on kitchen duty, who wants to handle this, and they said, who wants to be security liaison? And I thought, that sounds like a cool job. I'll be security liaison, and I put my hand up. So I was security liaison. And now I'm like, okay, I'm security liaison. So I stood up, I went out with Freddie, and I remember the drivers were sitting on a bench. And drivers in Central Africa are gold. Because remember, at this point, there are no maps, there's no Google, and you have to not only be able to know where to get to and where to get back without any roads, you have to be able to repair the truck. So drivers are exactly who you want as your best friend. And I walked out and I said, who's going in with me? I need to go into the Capitol. Who's going to drive? And Abakar stood up without a moment's hesitation and said, I'll drive you. And we got in the truck. It is only many years later that I realized the level of courage that Abakar had to do that. At that point, this was 1993. And I'll be honest, the fact that I was a white man in Africa gave me a little bit of currency and a little bit of safety. It did not give him any safety at all. So we got into the truck and we began to drive to the Capitol. And as soon as we got close enough that we could radio in, we radioed into the embassy. And DC was the call sign of the embassy, and Colorado, for whatever reason, was our call sign because the Peace Corps country director was from Colorado. And so I still remember getting on the radio and saying, DC, Colorado here, what's the situation? And we were stopped on the side of the road facing the Capitol. And they said, it's crazy, everybody's on lockdown, we've got the embassy secure, talking to the Marines in the embassy. Don't go anywhere. And I was like, well, I have to go into the Capitol. It's like, okay, if you have to go into the Capitol, don't go over the Chagwa Bridge, don't go by the presidential palace, and don't go by the airport. I'm like, okay. So unfortunately, I had to go over the Chagwa Bridge by the presidential palace and to the airport in order to get them, because that's exactly where they were standing. So we drove in, and we hit the first checkpoint. There is nothing in my mind more terrifying than a 15-year-old boy with a Kalashnikov rifle, right? 15-year-olds do not have a fully formed prefrontal cortex. At 15, a boy is nothing but hormones and fear. Kalashnikov has an effective range of about 1 kilometer that can still kill you within 1 kilometer. So there you go. We drive up. I'm completely unarmed, thank God. And I use my best Arabic, which by that point is pretty good, to talk my way through the first checkpoint, and the second checkpoint, and the third. By the time we get to the Chagua Bridge, you can hear the machine gun fire, you can hear the artillery, you can hear the tanks going in and out, the incoming rounds, the outgoing rounds. We make our way over the Chagua Bridge, past the presidential palace, checkpoint, checkpoint, not knowing who's rebel or who is government or what condition they're in. We get there, and I remember knocking on the door, and Kim Kelly comes out, and she says, "Oh, you're early." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm picking you up a little bit early. Why don't you get everybody and get into the truck?" And so they start getting ready and get into the truck, and I remember Kim asked me, she's like, I thought this was the dry season. And I'm like, "Well, why do you ask?" "Well, there's just been so much thunder and all, and I was just wondering, is the rainy season starting?" And I'm like, "We'll talk about that when you get in the truck. Get your stuff and get in the truck." And so they all got in the truck, and when they were in the truck, I said, "We're in the middle of an attempted coup, we're gonna get out of here." And Abakar drove us out, back through checkpoint after checkpoint after checkpoint. And obviously, spoiler alert, I'm here, I'm fine. All 6 of them are fine. I'm in touch with all of them to this day. It was the most terrifying thing I have ever done. Now, I know many people do more terrifying things on a regular basis. People are in the military, police officers, and I have to give them a ton of credit. It's really, really something when you hear shots and you go toward the shots. I was utterly terrified, and I learned I could do it. So that's the back of the postcard. My question for you, as you are at this beginning for your first postcard, what is something that would capture you? Something bold and daring that you really, really want to do? That you would be willing to throw yourself out into? I'm actually going to see if anybody's willing to answer that question. It's a highly personal one. Is there something, though, that you've got that you would be willing to do and throw yourself into? I think I've got mics and mic runners, so I'm just going to take 1 or 2 answers to this. I know it's very personal, I know it's hard, but I'd love to hear. What's something bold and daring that you are ready to throw yourself into? An adventure you're ready to take? Help me out, people. I'm going to stand here silently until 2 of you answer, so this could be a long lecture. All right. Here we go. If we could get a mic over. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Amy. I'm a junior at the college, and I'm originally from Birmingham, Alabama. Grew up just me and my parents, and so something that was really scary to me coming to college was the idea of studying abroad and being away from home for that long, because I already feel like Boston is too far. And so this summer, I took like a week in Paris, and it was very uncomfortable not knowing the language, and so I've committed myself to like exploring other languages and hopefully, studying abroad at some point in my academic career.
Fantastique. Une semaine à Paris. I have to say, Amy has not only chosen a challenge, she's chosen a really smart challenge, and one that is absolutely great to take. Thank you for that. One more. Something bold and courageous you're going to challenge yourself to do. You guys are tough. Consulting. It's good. One more, please. All right, I have somebody right there, if I could get a mic for her.
Houston, Texas, and there we go. This thing is, in fact, working. And I'm a senior at the college, and I'm super passionate about public policy and advocacy. but it doesn't always necessarily like have the highest like pay appeal. So I think the like bold and courageous thing I'm gonna try is that most of my work experience has been in like the public sector, and I think I'm gonna try applying like some of the skills that I've like learned from like working in DC and working for the government, and try to apply that in like the nonprofit space, just because I think that like it's one like very like actively developing, but there's not like a clear-cut answer as there is like a clear-cut process in government to try to apply those skills and really jump in and make a difference.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a lot less clear and a lot of opportunity as well. So those are both great answers to that question. Second postcard I want to share, a little briefer and a little less traumatic, at least for me, is coming to Silicon Valley and the work that I did in the neighborhoods. So again, you have to go back into the Wayback Machine to get a sense of this. It was 1998. I flew out for an interview with the city manager's office in the city of San Jose. San Jose, as some of you know, is right in the heart of Silicon Valley. It's what I call an A to Z city. It has an airport, it has a zoo, it has everything in between. It's also an A to Z tech city now. It has Adobe, it has Zoom, and it has 174 other tech companies headquartered there. So what you have is really this amazing place. And in 1998, when I flew out there, fresh from a decade of working in Africa, and I arrived, I did the interview, and I remember sitting at a cafe, and I was listening and watching people around me. And none of this is going to sound remarkable at this point, but at this point, in 1998, I had literally never seen this. There were people on their cell phones doing work. There was somebody with a laptop, which was pretty amazing in and of itself, and it was connected to a modem and a ricochet modem system that was set up on the lampposts where you could connect to the internet while you were on your laptop in a cafe. Boom! The future, mind blown, right there. And everybody was talking about their web startup and their stock options and what they were going to do. It was the center of the tech universe. And so it was also one of the most diverse cities in North America. 40% of people in San Jose were born outside of the United States. Some 57% speak a language other than English at home. And there is no majority of any race or ethnic group. It's so mixed and integrated. So I moved there, and I began to work in the most vulnerable neighborhoods, because San Jose is a tale of two cities. On the one hand, you have the tech elite, who come from all over the world and are the best of the best, and command very good salaries, stock options, and benefits. And then you have everybody else who's living there and trying to make it work, including multi-generational Latino families who have the heart and the roots in the agricultural heritage, the Valley of Heart's Delight, picking vegetables and fruit and canning, prunes, apricots, orchards all over the place. And I began to work with those neighborhoods and those neighborhood leaders, very much like I had worked with the farmers in Chad. And similarly, had the same two questions. Why? What's most important? We ended up working with 4,000 neighborhood leaders and working with them in 19 different neighborhood districts. And for the first time ever, rather than us creating a plan for each neighborhood, we had them create their own neighborhood plans, participatory urban development, and allowed them to prioritize out of everything that they might do what was most important. We created a literal top 10 list, because if you have 1,000 items on your to-do list, you're not going to get them done. And we took about $140 million, which was a considerable sum at that time, and invested it directly in that top 10 list. So we had 190 neighborhoods, 190 priorities, because we had 19 neighborhoods, each with 10 priorities. And we leveraged federal money, state money, grants, private resources, literally billions of dollars of other investment into those communities over about a 10-year period. And at the end of 10 years, we had accomplished 170 out of the 190 priorities that the neighborhoods had set, because we had a ruthless prioritization process and kept on implementation. It was extraordinary. It was amazing. And I have never been involved in such an at-scale example of participatory democracy in action. Absolutely stunning. Postcard. Flip over on the back. To do that, I went to neighborhood meetings. And they're typically at night because that's when neighbors aren't working. And every neighborhood is different and every neighborhood is the same. They have their issues and problems. I remember going into the Mayfair neighborhood and Guadalupe Gonzalez would talk to me about the issues in Mayfair. Mayfair is a traditionally Latino neighborhood. It's where Cesar Chavez was born, farm worker organizer, if you know Cesar, San Jose homeboy. And one of the things that Guadalupe wanted was lighting, street lighting. Not better street lighting, street lighting. We had no street lights in sections of Mayfair. This is the capital of Silicon Valley. This is in the 2000s, and we didn't have street lights in a neighborhood. That's one of her priorities. So we built the street lights. I remember working with Autumn Gutierrez in the Washington neighborhood, and her taking me on a tour and showing me where the pavement ended, and alleyways that were unpaved and streets full of potholes. All she wanted was to have a street that you could drive on without destroying your car. So we got those streets paved. And neighborhood meeting after neighborhood meeting after neighborhood meeting. Sometimes I would go to one, more than one a night. Sometimes I would go to one every night of the week. I'd go to stuff on Saturdays. I'd go to stuff on Sundays. I was everywhere in all of these neighborhoods. I also happened to be married at the time and have 2 small children. That is a recipe for being a mediocre dad and a lousy husband. All I was doing was showing up at work at 7 o'clock in the morning and going to other people's neighborhoods. The moment where it really hit me is I was preparing for a presentation for council. And that's a big deal in local government. You're going to present to your board. And we were walking through the projects, and we had an update on all the projects. And I was going through them one after the other. And I know that's $250,000 for that expansion of that park, and this is on time, and the reason that this is off schedule is because of this. And we got to one project, and I had no idea what it was. Had pictures of it, I couldn't place it. It was a library, and I'm like, I don't know that library. It was the Rose Garden Library. I live in the Rose Garden. It was my library. It was the library my kids go to. It was the library I should be taking my kids to. I knew everybody else's project, but I didn't know the library where Anya and Finn were picking up their books. So I did a reality check. I checked myself out of that job. I turned down a promotion that would have put me on the fast track to be city manager. I took a lateral. I went from managing $140 million and 75 people to managing me and a stack of paperwork and legal transaction documents for real estate deals and high-rise development. And I went into the office at about 8:30 in the morning, and I left at 5 after a good lunch hour and a good hour at the gym. And I got some therapy. I started doing some meditation, and I'm still married 25 years. And I love my kids, and they still talk to me. So I pulled myself out of that one by the barest of circumstances. My question for you out of that is, how are you going to balance and integrate your work, your service, everything you're doing outward with those that you actually love and those that actually love you? Right? I'm just going to take one answer to this. I know you guys are hard and you're being tough on me, but how are you going to integrate or deal with that balance? How do you do it now? How do you make time in the middle of all your studies, all your work, all the pressure on top of you for the people you actually love and the people who love you? I've got an answer right there. If I could get a mic.
Okay, so I think to me, you sort of have to make a conscious effort that, okay, these things really matter to me. They are priorities, so no matter probably how busy I am with work, I sort of have to find time to do this. So for example, I'm an international student, I'm a graduate student, and I moved here just recently, and I realized that I was so busy, it was very hard to keep in touch with family back home. But I made a conscious effort that if even probably I'm walking 10 minutes to class within that time, I could call home, talk with them, and at least if I do this 3 times a day, I don't have to, but they still realize I'm much more connected. So to me, I think it's just more of having that conscious effort that this really matters to me, even if I have to put 10 minutes, 5 minutes aside. It's usually about how regular you do it and not about how long you do it. So,
yeah, some brilliance in that. Intentionality, you have to make the choice. Building it into your routine and your daily basis, booking the time for it, and consistency. Consistency is king, right? Whether it's exercise, whether it is research, whether it is writing your novel or starting your business, consistency is king. Some of the best businesses have been started on an hour a day, but they made the time for it. Some of the best novels have been written an hour a day, but they made the time for it, right? And some of the best relationships have been built on 10 minutes in between making a call. Really good stuff. Postcard number 3, maybe a little bit closer to what some of you know and are thinking about. Tech is my path not taken. My mother taught me to code, or at least conceptually to code, when I was a little guy. She was a coder. Back when coding meant actually taking a stack of cards and taking them to the mainframe and having them run through and see if they compiled or not. And I've always been interested in technology, but never pursued that path until I went to work for PayPal. And I went to work for PayPal because one day PayPal came to the city. Amy, Aronika, and Prashanti Ravanaputra came to the mayor, and they said, hey, we'd love to do more with PayPal in the city. And the mayor said, oh, great, go talk to Kip. And I remember coming up, and I had a busy day, and I was kind of like, why am I meeting with these people from PayPal? And I had a bad attitude, and I stopped myself at the door, took a breath, and said, I'm going to learn something interesting. This is going to be an interesting meeting. And I went in, and boy, was it ever. And at first, they were talking about all the things that they could do, and then I said, Amy, stop, wait a minute. Be honest with me. What do you really want out of a volunteer opportunity with the city? And they're like, well, please don't send us to go clean up another park. I'm like, okay, I want you to be selfish. What would we do if this was about you and what you want in PayPal? She thought for a moment, and she said, well, this is the deal. We've got a bunch of brilliant engineers, people who know how to code, people who know how to get things done, people from all over the globe who've shown how smart they are and how good they are. But none of them, almost none of them, have the slightest clue of what a small business is or how to run a small business. And our core and our bread and butter of our business is small businesses. I would love to do something that could teach my engineers about small businesses and their perspective. So I said, great, let me think about this. Came back a couple of days later with a proposal for what became the Small Business Challenge. We took teams of engineers and technologists from PayPal, and we put them up with an actual local small business that had a technology problem or an issue, and we used agile methodology over the course of about 16 weeks to create a solution for that small business. And then if it worked, they took it to scale. Didn't have to be a PayPal product, could be anything at all. And it was wonderful to watch the interaction. For some of these engineers, it was the first time they'd ever had an interaction with a small business. It was the first time we did a scavenger hunt, and I made them get around and get out in downtown San Jose. I made them talk to homeless people, talk to wait staff. I made them try to send money back by Western Union and see how horrible and expensive that is. And it was an eye-opener for them, an absolute eye-opener. I still remember one guy who was working with, there's this business called TreatBot, and it was a ice cream truck, karaoke combination, right? So if you were actually good enough at singing karaoke, you got a free ice cream at this ice cream truck. I've never gotten a free ice cream, I'll just say that. And Ryan Sebastian was there, and then one of the guys from PayPal was working with him, and he was actually showing off what was then a new PayPal product, kind of the competitor for Square. And he's like, and you do this, and you do this, and you do this, and then here you go, and then you can sell the ice cream. And you can take their credit card, and you don't need to call it in. And Ryan Sebastian, who's classic Northern California, was like, dude, that's like 3 clicks to get sales tax on an ice cream cone. My people are not going to do 3 clicks to get sales tax on 100 ice cream cones in an hour. And the guy was like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. He was so right. And the guy went back and literally changed the roadmap and the structure and the form of the product for PayPal because of that customer experience. After that, Peace Corps said, you ought to come work for me, us. And I said, you ought to make me an offer. So they did. I came on board as with PayPal, excuse me, did I say Peace Corps? PayPal, as the director of the Global Technology Program. and took every year about 10 or 15 of the brightest out of the 5,000 technologists and engineers and took them through a 2-year program. Every 6 months, I'd send them overseas to somewhere else and let them learn part of the business or part of the technology that they didn't know, spinning them up from being good engineers to being great leaders. And it was amazing. I remember one of the guys in the program, Tejas, and he and I were working on executive presence. Executive presence is often hard for classic engineers. I'm always reminded of one of my favorite engineering jokes. What's the difference between an extroverted engineer and an introverted engineer? The extroverted engineer looks at your shoes when he's talking to you. You guys are a really hard audience. Okay. Anyway, Tejas was an introverted engineer, introverted in the extreme. He had been his own entrepreneur, very successful, but he had a very thick Indian accent, was very, very quiet and very, very shy. All of this made it hard for him to be successful within the North American context. People kind of railroaded over him, didn't listen to him, and kind of downplayed his ideas. He was stone cold brilliant. And so I was working with him on executive presence so he could get other people to listen to his ideas. And we were doing this session, and we were just doing it for practice. And I said, well, share with me something you've been working on that you think is a good idea. And so we went through it, and it was really technological and complicated, and I hadn't had enough coffee that morning, and I could barely understand it. And like, why? Tell me that again. Do that again. Do you mean this? Do you mean that? And then finally, it clicked. And I said, wait a minute. You mean right now, PayPal is sizing its capacity in its data centers to meet peak loads. And we're keeping that size basically going the whole time in anticipation of those peak loads. And the new technology you have now, you think can allow us to dynamically size our capacity. And that dynamic sizing can translate to energy savings and electricity savings in data centers, which translates to $16 million a year in annual savings? And he's like, yes, I think I can do that. But I need like 10 engineers and $100,000 to test it out. I'm like, okay, we're going to go and we're going to talk to Sri Shivananda. And I don't know, you may hear from Sri later. He may not even remember this. He's so busy with stuff. But Sri was CTO at PayPal, absolutely amazing guy. And then the next day, a couple of days later, I have Tejas walk in and pitch it to Sri. And he says, starts out and he says, I think I can save you $16 million a year. Sri's like, you've got my attention. He gives Tejas what he needs, and the team goes off and does the work. Pretty amazing. Unlocking people's potential, giving them their voice, letting them create and change the world. It's a postcard. So the flip side, and there's a theme here. The flip side to this one is, and this is definitely hashtag tech problems, right? This is something you're not going to get any sympathy from anybody on. But in an environment like that, I had 25 direct report managers in 9 different time zones. And I was recruiting for a global program. So that meant every year I was on a recruiting cycle where I would spend time in Paris and in Europe and in Berlin and in London and in Chennai and in Bangalore and in Singapore and in Kuala Lumpur and in Dublin and in Omaha and in Baltimore and all across the globe trying to recruit for the best of the best of the best. And they travel well. I got to fly business class. I was in good hotels. I ate good on the company dime. PayPal was very, very, very good to me. But I remember at that point, there was one point, and I was on a recruiting swing, and I literally would have to, before I went to bed, go, this is Tuesday. I'm in Berlin. I'm in the Ibis Hotel. I'm in room 121, and the bathroom is on the right. Because I was traveling and changing places so much that if I didn't do that before I went to bed, I would wake up and not know where I was or how to get to the bathroom. And at that point, I realized, I'm not sure I want to keep doing this. And that's also the point in my life, coming back to my family, where Finn, my son, could do a perfect imitation of me on the phone. And he's like, oh yeah, well, no, I don't think I can do that meeting because I'll be in India that day. Which is pretty funny when you do it once, but when it becomes a reality, it's pretty hard again on a life with young children. So I the question out of that point, it was time for me to go. My time at PayPal was done, and I actually ended up coming back to the city to run the innovation and technology work there. And the question, which I think is a very interesting one, is how important is it for you to make money? How important is it for you to make money for other people? I'm going to leave that one unanswered because I think it's a very, very personal question. But I want you to consider it because a lot of what you end up doing if you're in tech can very quickly be about making money or making money for other people. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you really want to know if that's what motivates you, and you want to make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. Postcard number 4. As I mentioned, I came back to the city, deputy city manager, which is what? It's basically an executive vice president, if you know corporate culture, which is what? You report directly to the city manager. City manager is the CEO of the city in cities that don't have a strong mayor. So a city like Boston has a strong mayor where the mayor is the executive. In San Jose, the mayor is not the executive. The mayor is the chairman of the board. So you have a city manager who is the CEO and the deputy city manager types like myself who have a portfolio. And I came back to run the innovation and technology portfolio for the city and ended up backing into the emergency management portfolio when we had a flood. And I texted into the city manager and said, hey, do you need somebody to help? And he said, yeah, you should come in and run the emergency operations center tomorrow at 7. And so I came in and started running the emergency operations center. And one of the things I will give you as advice, if you ever get into crisis or emergency response, once you do it and you're labeled as good at it, you can never get out of it. So you get sucked into that world, as I did. And on January 23rd, 2020, I woke up in the middle of the night and I remembered a news story I had heard. The Chinese Politburo had met in special session about the novel coronavirus in Wuhan. And I'm a political geek. I like politics. And I was like, the Politburo met in special session. That never happens. The last time I can remember the Soviet Politburo meeting in special session, when there was a Soviet Union, was when the Chernobyl reactor blew up. This thing in Wuhan is bad. We need to activate. And so the next morning, January 24th, 2020, I sent out an email and activated our pandemic response team, which I had made up and which consisted of me and 8 other people that I pulled into a room at 8 o'clock in the morning to begin doing the work on the pandemic response. They thought I was crazy. I thought I might be crazy, but we began to do the work and the planning and the preparation. And that gave us about a month-and-a-half lead on everybody else so that when the pandemic hit in force and when the lockdown started, we were ready. Turns out the pandemic and leading a response in the pandemic required about 5 things. Required a knowledge of infectious disease and how it's transmitted, which I had picked up working for Peace Corps and the World Bank in Africa for about 10 years. It required a knowledge of technology and basic technology as you transferred everything to virtual systems, which I had acquired in PayPal. It required a knowledge of the vulnerable communities and neighborhoods in the neighborhoods that you're working, which I had acquired during the Strong Neighborhoods Initiative and working with the community there. And it required a knowledge of emergency management and emergency operations center, which I had acquired during the time with the floods. And it required that you understand agile methodologies and how to do things at scale. So the COVID-19 pandemic was my perfect crisis. And I jumped into it, and the team was amazing. Now, talking about it now, I think it's really easy to forget what that was, but it was unknown. We didn't know how many people were going to die. We didn't know how it was transmitted. We didn't know what we should do. We had never done this before. And in the space of just a few weeks, using agile methodologies and very much acting like a venture capitalist, we began to invest in little startups, if you will, within the emergency center and spin them up into full-scale enterprises. I remember bringing in Dolan Beckel, who had been a partner at Accenture, and Neil Ruffino, who was deep, deep, deep from the community in Parks and Rec, put them together and said, food. We're going to need to feed people. Our health program, our food program at that point was feeding 875 seniors a week. I said, we're going to need to find partners who know how to do this. We're going to need to assume that the system might collapse and the supply chain might collapse. We're going to have to move fast to feed everybody who needs to be fed, vulnerable people at scale. Go. And they treated it like a startup. And they set up a Scrum team, and they developed a business plan and a roadmap for it. Within a week, they had identified partners who were capable of feeding 1.5 million meals a week. Within 5 weeks, they had scaled that up to 3.5 million meals a week and built out the first ever data system to understand between the 19 major food providers where the demand and the need was and begin to create an internal marketplace to move and regulate the food to where it needed to be. They sustained that. We invested $78 million in scaling that infrastructure and scaling that food. And by the end of the pandemic, as of now, we have provided 250 million free meals to people in San Jose. And as a result of that, people did not starve. People who were out of work could survive. And we averted what would have been a catastrophic disaster. All by treating it like a startup and scaling and using agile methodologies and innovation approach applied to emergency response. We did that also with vaccines and shots. The county had the mass vaccination. We knew they were going to take care of the vast majority of people. But what was our role? And so I brought in Ann Tran, who was 28, had dropped out of her medical work because she has an immune deficiency and could never be a doctor, but had more medical training than anybody else in the city. Had managed 2 people previously, and I put her in charge of our vaccine task force. Gathered them together, and we asked the same questions. Why, what's most important? And after grilling them and going back and forth and them almost quitting on me about 3 or 4 times, they came up with this. Our job is to put shots in arms of people who otherwise would not get shots. Not to give information or communicate, not to share messages, not to encourage, but to actually get shots in arms of people who otherwise would not get shots. They created a roadmap, ran a scrum team, and scaled against that. They started out with people who were homebound seniors. We got our firefighters trained in injections, and we went out to them and gave them the shots. Then they added adults with developmental disabilities, people who are monolingual Spanish speakers, monolingual Vietnamese speakers. We have the largest Vietnamese-speaking population in North America outside of Vietnam, and so on, so forth, on and on and on. At the end of the day, that little mighty unit was scaled to be 75 people, and we actually hired 175 people that we sent over to the county to help with the mass vaccination. Ensured an extra 50,000 people got shots who would not otherwise have gotten shots at the mass vaccination center. As a result of that, we are the most vaccinated large city in North America, and we literally saved lives. It's hard to know exactly what the numbers would be, but if you look at other cities of our size who didn't do that work, you know that hundreds and thousands of more people would have died in San Jose if we hadn't done the vaccinations at that rate. Ann Tran and her team saved lives. Dolan Beckel, Neil Ruffino, and his team saved lives. It was the most amazing response I have ever been part of, and the thing of which I am most proud. Postcard, flip side. I made the mistake of pulling my timesheet at one point because you have to keep track of this time for reimbursement, and I was averaging 89 hours a week. Now, I was EOC director along with Lee Wilcox from January 24th, 2020 to July 3rd, 2021. About 526 days, but who's counting? And I averaged 89 hours a week during that time. So if I had gotten comp time, which I am not eligible for, I made the mistake of running this calculation, I would be due 2 years of vacation time. So I worked an extra 2 years within that time in that context. I remember food just appearing before me. Thank you, Ann and family. All I did was work, eat, and sleep, and exercise, and meditate. And work, eat, sleep, exercise, meditate. Work, eat, sleep, exercise, meditate. I had no personal life whatsoever. I had no connection with friends. I just worked for 526 days. And I nearly killed myself. Now, I know people literally died out there, and there were people on the front line who had it much, much worse than I did, but I had the physical and emotional toll of feeling and being professionally responsible for the lives of 1.2 million people and guiding an organization of 6,900 through the worst crisis it had ever seen. So I checked myself out. I said, I'm done. I'm taking a sabbatical. And the city manager said, great. Do we have a sabbatical program? I said, no, but we have a leave of absence program, and I'd like to take 6 months leave of absence. He said, that's fantastic. So I went to Costa Rica, sat on the beach, watched the sunset, tried to learn some Spanish. I came to Harvard, and I taught a little bit. I worked in Dublin on the infrastructure innovation work with Professor Ricketts, who you normally see here. And I thought about what matters. What do I really want to do? And I will say that that's the question out of this postcard. What is something you would give everything for? Right? What is something you would give everything for? And what really matters? And then this last one, and I'll make this one short and open it up to you all. I came back out of that, and I remember sitting in Costa Rica, which if you ever get a chance to sit in the mountains and looking at the beach in Costa Rica for a couple of months, you should really do that. And I remember, this is an amazing place. This is a beautiful place. And we only have this one planet. And we're screwing it up. This thing called climate change, it's not a myth. It's not a conspiracy. And we're a little bit farther along than anybody would really like us to be. Even if we get to carbon neutral, even if we mitigate all of the greenhouse gases that we're putting out, it's still going to get hotter. And in California, it's going to get drier, and it's going to get wetter, and there are going to be more floods and more droughts. We're going to have to deal with that. So I remember writing a letter back to the city manager and saying, I'd like to come back, and I'd like to be in charge of our climate response and adaptation, and I'd like to have our infrastructure, because that's where the difference is. Our water, our sewer, our electricity. They said yes, and I came back, and I'm working to scale our clean energy so that we can have 100% clean energy in the city of San Jose. We have 124 contracts for energy generation of solar, wind, hydro, geothermal that are valued at $2.98 billion. I want to see if we can rebuild our city's infrastructure so that we take our regional wastewater facility, where we have 120 million gallons of sewage coming in. We do tertiary treatment, 3 levels of treatment, and it goes back out in San Francisco Bay, a lot cleaner than the Mississippi. Can we take that and turn that into a circle and create drinking water for Silicon Valley and preserve the engines of Silicon Valley from drought? I think we can if we can invest $1 billion or $2 billion here and there and do the right thing. And then, can we deal with sea level rise? Can we build a levee that will block out the sea level rise for at least the next 50 years and preserve all of that industrial space in North San Jose and that regional wastewater facility so it isn't overwhelmed? I think we can do that too. So those are all the things that I'm working on now. And then as I flip this final postcard over, the piece here that I'm realizing is I'm done. I'm almost done with this lecture, but I'm almost done with my career as well. I probably have about 16 months left as the city, and then I'm going to rip up that resume and never let people like Jerry introduce me again. And not because he didn't do a good job, but because I don't need to be those things anymore. And I'm going to try to put myself in your shoes. And what would I do if I were beginning again? If everything were possible? That's pretty amazing, and that's pretty terrifying. So in 16 months, I will be ripping up that resume, and I will be back out in life, and I'll be asking exactly the same questions that you are. So with that, those are my postcards. Thank you very much for listening and your kind attention.